Hey everybody, welcome to Pop Culture Philosophers. I'm Rockin Robbie Billups and it's time for a top 5. Today, top 5 X-Men villains. That's right everybody, thanks for checking out the video. I am Rockin Robbie Billups. Thanks for coming here and checking out the video. I am going to be doing a Robbie's top 5 today, and today I'm listing my top 5 favorite X-Men villains of all time. So let's get right into it. At number 5, we have Cassandra Nova. Cassandra Nova was such a dope villain. She first appeared in New X-Men 114, which was written by Grant Morrison. This is part of the Grant Morrison New X-Men run, which is a very divisive run of X-Men, I should say. Some people really love it. Some people really hate it. Most people are not quite in the middle. They're one or the other. I love it. I love this run so much. Cassandra Nova is the twin sister of Xavier. And it was a secret that Xavier has kept throughout the entirety of the X-Men. And when it happened, and as it was coming out, it was blowing my mind. It was absolutely amazing. She is malicious. She is malevolent. She is just absolutely insane. And her plans were so meticulous. And it really put the X-Men down and ground them to a halt. I love this character. She hasn't been used too much since then, probably for the better, because I don't know if other people could really quite handle this concept as eloquently as Grant Morrison did. I absolutely loved it. New X-Men is one of my favorite runs of the X-Men ever, and Grant Morrison did such a great job of introducing this new villain, and she's the centerpiece of this run for me, along with a bunch of other new characters like Zorn and Beak and Angel and all that kind of stuff. But Cassandra Nova is still, to me, to date, one of the most threatening, one of the most seriously threatening villains that the X-Men have ever faced. And at number 4, we have the Sentinels. The Sentinels have been a factor into the X-Men universe ever since X-Men number 14 way back in the 60s, right? The Sentinels, though, are amazing. You may just look at them as these big, dumb robots, and that's probably what we're used to, but as the ages progressed, as comic books kept getting more and more nuanced and detailed and filled with lore and mythology, the Sentinels evolved to such a peak. Seriously, those clunky, old-school Sentinels that you see in the X-Men animated series, that you see in the early days of the X-Men, that you still see occasionally today, that's not necessarily what I'm talking about. That's just the first steps. The Sentinels have definitely upgraded multiple times in the history of the X-Men, even up into the future. You got your Bastions, you got your Nimrods, you got your Nano Sentinels. That kind of ties into the Cassandra Nova bit from part 5, right? Or from number 5. The Sentinels are absolutely amazing and a great threat to the X-Men because, first of all, it's mechanical, it's artificial intelligence, and it's designed by humanity. So at first, it seems like the Sentinels are mankind's response against mutants, right? Man fears mutants, so they create Sentinels. But in doing so, what they actually do is set into motion a series of events that lead to artificial life, that lead to artificial intelligence. And then that gets projected out into the future, and it gets more and more complex as the writers have come in over the years. If you look what Hickman's doing right now in House of X Powers of 10 and the Dawn of X stuff, he has taken the idea of the artificial intelligence in the Sentinel and has thrown it so far ahead that it absolutely blows my mind. And he's made a connection I never made before. Humans, mutants, there's a battle there. But what they really need to be concerned about is this third level of evolution. Humanity into mutant into artificial intelligence. It's why they have maintained themselves as a threat. And yeah, you may not see the big clunky Sentinels anymore, but that's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about the whole line of the Sentinels. From the original Mark I Sentinels all the way into the future and Nimrod. This stuff is super threatening, super devastating to the X-Men, and it's a threat that's never gone away. At number 3, Phoenix. Seriously, what greater threat than one of their own? The Phoenix is this cosmic force of utter destruction. It helps maintain the balance of the universe. It's quite a figure like Galactus or something like that, right? The Phoenix is an amazing threat to the X-Men. It's a threat to the entire cosmos, to be honest with you. But when one of their own was absorbed by the Phoenix, that's Jean Grey. When Jean Grey became the Dark Phoenix, it was probably one of the most tragic and sad and relevant villains to ever hit the X-Men universe. This stuff was amazing. Multiple times this has happened. They've kind of gone back and forth here and there. Oh, it was Jean, it wasn't Jean, it was a clone body of Jean. In the Grant Morrison New X-Men run, though, it is 100% Jean getting imbued with this Phoenix power, and it keeps getting crazier and crazier. It's even led into things like Avengers versus the X-Men. The Phoenix is always an ever-looming threat to the entire Marvel Universe that starts in the X universe. And seriously, you add in the idea that it can take over one of their own. When Jean Grey becomes the Phoenix, whether it's back in the Claremont and Byrne days or whether it's in the Morrison and Quitely days, it still has the same impact. To be able to go up against Jean Grey may just be the absolute best X-Man there ever has been, and then to have that loss, that turn, that tragic sequence of events that leads the X-Men to have to basically take her out every time. The only way to deal with this, for the most part, is to kill the host body, and this has happened multiple times. Jean died back in the day. She died back in the not so long ago day with the Grant Morrison stuff. But no matter how they kind of retcon things here and there, like I said, in the old school days, it wasn't actually Jean Grey. It was like a clone facsimile of her body or something. But it doesn't matter. The emotions are there. The stakes are high. They're always high when the Phoenix is involved, especially when it goes into one of their own and Jean Grey becomes the Dark Phoenix. I think that's just absolutely one of the best X-Men villains ever. And at number 2, we've got Magneto. Magneto, created way back in the day in X-Men #1 by Jack Kirby and Stan Lee. Magneto just maintains his level as one of the best and most recognizable X-Men villains out there. He's not always a villain. Sometimes he's actually a good guy, like when he kind of temporarily took over the school, led the New Mutants, had that weird purple costume with the M and all that kind of jazz. And then even when his clone little brother of Joseph kind of ran around with the X-Men for a while, Magneto always kind of goes back and forth. Now he's back in the camp of the X-Men. Of course, all the villains are at that point. But Magneto is a great villain because in the traditional history of Marvel villains, their best ones, they're not just bad for bad's sake. They actually have a legitimate reason. If you look at Magneto's perspective, if you look at his point of view on the world, you can kind of understand what he's saying. It's very much like a Dr. Doom, for instance, right? You can completely understand where Magneto's coming from, and sometimes I feel Magneto was right. Anyway, Magneto's a great villain because he's always a threat to the X-Men. He's super powerful. He knows them. He knows Charles. He knows all the students. He can manipulate them. He can do all kinds of crazy stuff. And he's just an uber powerful villain. And it's that tragic backstory, that nuance and dimension that has been given to Magneto over the years that makes him rise and soar above all the others, like a Juggernaut or a Mr. Sinister or an Omega Red or something like that. Magneto is fantastic, and he has been portrayed in cinema by fantastic actors. Ian McKellen, Michael Fassbender, great interpretations of a great character. There's so much to him, and he has always been a threat to the X-Men. And even when he is on their side, as he is right now, it's always going to go another way because Magneto has his own motivations. He has his ulterior motives and all that kind of jazz. Really excited about Magneto. He's one of the best X-Men villains ever. But at number 1, I gotta put Apocalypse. Apocalypse first appeared in X Factor number 5 and number 6, and I have been enthralled with him ever since. I started reading comic books back in 1986. That was right around the time Apocalypse was showing up, and X Factor was one of those books that my stepfather read and passed on down to me at that time, and I was immediately obsessed with him. He's got an Egyptian backstory. He's got this really cool futuristic technology. He is so mysterious, so crazy, and he actually doesn't ever hardly do any fighting or battling himself. He's always kind of behind the scenes. Right? And I almost thought about, maybe he should actually be number 2 and Magneto should be number 1. But for me, Apocalypse is always going to be number 1. Because he's got a great attitude. The guy who did the voice in the X-Men animated series from the 90s completely nailed it. It's great. He's all about evolution. He's all about survival of the fittest. And he was quite possibly the world's first mutant. So I love the connection to Egyptian mythology. I love all that kind of stuff. The connection to the Celestials and to the outlying cosmicness of the Marvel Universe. I think it's fantastic. It's great. He's always there at every big event that ever happens for the X-Men. He may not be the cause. He may not be the centerpiece, but he's always there, and he always survives. Survival of the fittest, Well, Apocalypse to me is the most fit X-Men villain out there. He can control pretty much every molecule of his body. He can change shape. He can grow in size. He's ultra powerful. He always has his 4 horsemen of the apocalypse. And I was always a big Bible nerd when I was a kid too, so you throw that in with my Egyptian mythology nerdism, and it just absolutely has... That's why. Apocalypse is so badass. He's got a great look. He's got a great sense of just being in the X-Men books. He's always fantastic. There's not too many Apocalypse stories where you think that's the definitive Apocalypse story. We could argue that it's Age of Apocalypse, but even then, that happens after he's already completely just dominated everything, right? Apocalypse is a great villain, though, and here's a good reason explaining why. Right now, all the villains of the X-Men are kind of like on Krakoa and chilling out and hanging out and all that kind of stuff, right? Out of all of them, you got Magneto, you got Sinister, you got Exodus, and yeah, you may not trust them, but you think for the most part it's going to be fine. But Apocalypse, what Apocalypse is doing, I'm always paying attention to what he's doing, because Apocalypse only cares about himself and his theology, his own idea about survival of the fittest. So he's always there for mutant rights. He's actually even gone above and beyond that. He's actually turned members of the X-Men into Horsemen of Apocalypse, like Wolverine and Gambit. He even had Hulk be the Horseman of War. Fantastic stuff. Great stuff. Apocalypse is always threatening. He has the best lines. I just want bigger, better Apocalypse stories. But I think we're nearing the edge of another one. So that's my top 5 favorite X-Men villains. Those are my personal favorites. Who are your favorite X-Men villains? Let me know in the comments below. Let's keep this conversation going. I know it's been a long time coming, but I never forgot that the next episode of Robbie's Top 5 was supposed to be X-Men villains, and that's why we're doing it here right now. So the Top 5 is back. If you have any suggestions for future videos, let us know in the comments down below. And once again, please let us know what your top 5 favorite X-Men villains are in the comments below. Let's keep this conversation going. Thank you so much for checking out the video. I am Rockin Robbie Billups. Please join us at popculturephilosophers.com for podcasts and a whole lot more. Thanks for rocking with us. Keep on top 5-ing.